Okay, well, welcome everybody. Again, my name is Stefan Meyer with the Finland Food Chain up here in Finland, Minnesota. The Finland Food Chain is a group of people who are working with a Bush grant, a Bush Foundation grant, to develop, to assess and develop a regional food system for the Finland area. Hopefully someday actually kind of putting that out and further and along the North Shore and even towards the Iron Range as we build our northeastern Minnesota food system. Part of what we are doing is education, and we are applying for grants, and Cindy here can tell you all a little about herself. But she has got a lot of experience writing grants and has successfully procured money from various entities over her span. So thank you and welcome, and let's get going.
All right, I'm Cindy Hale. Some of you probably know who I am. I am the producer, education, and infrastructure coordinator for the Finland Food Chain Group. I'm super thrilled to be serving, and I translate is that I'm a resource for growers. So anything that I can do to help you navigate, doing what you do, if I can, I want to help. And one thing that I am actually pretty good at is grant writing. I was with the University of Minnesota for 20 plus years. They never gave me a salary, so I had to write grants to pay myself and to run my program. So I got pretty good at it. I don't want to do it for a living, but I really enjoy sharing what I know to help farmers, because it's a great way that farmers can get funding to answer really important questions that can further not just their own production, but the production of others. So that's what this is all about. We're gonna go really quickly through these slides. Once the slideshow goes up, I can't see the chat box any longer, but Stefan's gonna be monitoring that, and he's gonna make sure to stop me, make me take a breath, and pitch questions at me. I am gonna go pretty quickly, but don't feel shy to say, whoa, stop, you need to answer this question. And then ideally we're going to have a little bit of time at the end for you to ask questions. So all right, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. Does that sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, come on, share. There we go. Share. We got it there, Stefan?
Yeah, I am seeing it. Yes.
All right. All right. All right. So, Farmer Grant Writing 101. Woohoo! So, we're going to go through a lot. Remember, we're recording this. I believe it's being live streamed on Facebook, but I don't know for sure. If it is, then that'll be available immediately upon completion. So you can look there. And we have, well, you're going to be muted. So use the chat box when you have questions. So there's a lot of grant programs out there. Lots. If you've been looking, you probably feel overwhelmed. Don't worry about it. Everybody feels that way. MDA alone has a ton of grants. This is just the list, a screenshot of the list on their website. So what I'm really trying to do today is introduce farmers to a few grant programs that are on the, looking at, we have deadlines coming up this fall for 2021 projects. These are grants that are really tailored to farmers and looking at sustainable agriculture research, demonstration, education projects. And then there's also the value added grant. So this is just a really quick overview table of those three grant programs that list kind of the range of grant amounts. So the Minnesota Value Added Grant, that is specifically for equipment purchases for value added products. So if you're a dairy grower or you need to buy some equipment for your inspected kitchen, this is the grant for you. If you are a restaurant or a grocery store who needs new equipment, they've actually moved that out of this. It used to be a part of this. Now it's moved out to another program called the Good Acres Grant. If you go to the Minnesota Value Added Grant Program, on the website it says here's who's eligible, and it says really clear, if you're a restaurant or a grocery store who needs equipment, go to this, and it has a hot link and it'll take you right to that Good Acres Grant Program. So, but this is for, again, equipment for processing or value-added products. It's a 25% match, so that means you cover 75% of the project costs, and then you get reimbursed for 25%, which if you're spending $100,000 ain't chump change. So it's a really good way to get help with equipment upgrades. And then what I'm going to really spend the lion's share of this presentation on is talking about how to develop a proposal around on-farm research, demonstration projects, and education outreach. There's a lot of transferability just in terms of, how do you write a narrative that's going to be relevant for the value added, but I'm really going to be focusing on these two grants. So just as a right off the top, if you're looking for money to build, do remodeling, construction, buy land, vehicles, these ain't the projects for you. There are probably other ones that you might be able to look at through USDA or state programs, but these are specifically, those are specifically ineligible expenses. In the eligible expenses, you can include some equipment, but it has to be very specifically related to the project, and there are limitations on how much. Matching funds. So basically matching funds are kind of the amount of skin in the game for you. The SARE grants require 0% matching on the direct costs, so personnel, materials, and then a 50% match on equipment. Again, you're going to hear me talk about RFPs. RFPs, that's a request for proposal, and it gives you all the details. So I'm going to go fast over, and then the details are in the RFP. The Minnesota Sustainable Ag Demonstration Grants, there's a 0% match on the first $25,000, and then a 50% match over that. So you can request a grant for $50,000. If you are requesting, for example, a $50,000 grant, you're going to have to kick in $25,000. So the total project cost is $75,000. You're going to get $50,000. Hope that makes sense. All right, and then I'm also tipping my hat to Dave Abaz and the Northeast Regional Sustainable Development Team. There are some really cool projects, funding opportunities through them as well. There's a little bit more time on these. They're going to be starting to review them in February and March, and then those that are selected after that preliminary review will be solicited for a full project proposal in April. You can find all that information at their link, and David put that in the chat box as well. So these are really good grants to look at. They also have this small dollar rapid response. So a lot of farmers markets and vendors who need to do upgrades or get materials and expenses to deal with COVID got these early in the season. They have more money because COVID ain't going away anytime soon. So if you haven't used these funds and you have need, again, look at the Northeast Regional Sustainable Development Partnership link, and you can find out about that. I think there's still just one paragraph proposals. David, could you maybe put that in the chat box? So they're easy money to get if you need it. So back to the on-farm research, education, demonstration grants. The first thing for any grant, but these in particular, is know the eligibility. Who and where is eligible. So who is eligible is particularly for these, it's the farmer rancher who is defined as someone who raises crops and livestock, and especially as a business, whether it's a sole proprietorship or an LLC or corporation, that doesn't really matter, but you have to be actively engaged. If you are an educational organization or a nonprofit that wants to do education around that, there's a whole nother slew of grant programs for you. You could certainly partner with a farmer or rancher on these grants, but this isn't your primary source of funding. Eligible projects. There's all kinds of really interesting projects, from on-farm energy, weed control, beneficial insects, livestock production models, cover crops, soil quality, soil carbon. The list goes on and on and on. And again, the RFP, the request for proposal, from each of these programs gives you a list of typical projects. Another thing you can do at all the websites of these different grant programs is look at past projects, and it really can give you a nice kind of broad scope on what kinds of projects have been funded in the past and might be likely to be funded in the future, assuming they're different. I mean, if you're trying to recreate a wheel that's already been driven down the road a few times, you're not going to get funded. So you need to find a unique spin on something. The Farmer Rancher grant programs through SARE are a little different in terms of their funding limits than the MDA. It's just the MDA, you can request a dollar amount no matter how many people are involved, although you have to justify them. For the SARE grants, it's $9,000 for an individual farm, $18,000 for a team of 2 farmers, and then $27,000 for a group of 3 or more. You're encouraged strongly to link with the university and other nonprofit partners on the SARE. The MDA grants, it is a requirement. So if you haven't already started to reach out to collaborators and you're interested in those grants, the MDA grants, go take a look at that RFP and start thinking about who your collaborators might be. In the RFP, you're also going to get lots and lots of information about who to contact for help. Project managers in different states, in different sections of the state, and definitely take advantage of them. They're there to help you and to try to be successful. So, as are we, and I'm more than happy to help as I can. So the first part, writing a successful grant, it's not a linear process. You're going to go through and edit and revise and tweak, and sometimes it's the original concept is going to look very different than what the end result is, because it is that non-linear process. But the end result of your grant proposal, when it's written, should look linear. So don't beat yourself up about the fact that when you sit down to write it, it just doesn't flow out like this magical thing. That's not how it works. So know the RFP, read the RFP. There are character, page, word limits, required font sizes, eligible expenses, a whole bunch of different things. MDA requires online submission, requires. So if you have an issue with that, you need to reach out to one of the project coordinators and help find a solution. They're going to help you find a solution. Perhaps we can help you if that's something that we can serve. The SARE grants, you can still submit via email, hard copies, or online. Any way you slice it, whether you're submitting online or in Word, you're going to write the whole proposal in a Word document and have it all ready to go, everything ready to go before you go to submit, and then you're just going to cut and paste it into the online system. You don't want to attempt to generate this content while you're sitting there trying to submit it. No way. No way, Jose. Another thing that the RFP includes, all of these grant programs have a template embedded in them that literally gives you the format that you're going to need to put your grant proposal in, including things like word limits, character limits. It's also really important to understand the timeline. This will be in the RFP as well. You're submitting a proposal this fall for projects that start in the spring of 2021. SARE grants are right now limited to 23 months or 2 years. The MDA grants can go up to 3 years, minimum of 1 year, up to 3 years. So again, find that in their RFP.
Hey, Cindy.
Yes.
Yeah, so a good question came across. When it comes to like, for instance, a criteria for a grant, like new production methods, do they need to be new for the farming industry or just or new for your farm, or can there
They,
be duplicates?
good question. So they don't have to be new to farming overall, but they have to have some kind of novel aspect. Maybe it's a production system that's never been used in our climate range or in our soils. Um, it, it, there has to be something unique about it in order for it to get funded. And the other piece that's really important, I'll get to this, I'll hit this again, is that it can't just be relevant to your farm. It has to be something that is transferable to other farmers. It's not just all about you. I know it should be, but it's not. So that's a really important criteria when you're looking at, especially when you're looking at a production model. If it's new or novel, or you're doing some twist on it that makes it unique or applicable in different areas, that's a good starting point. So, and I'm going to throw out some weird terms. If you get confused, just let me know. So within the RFP, there's going to be a section called review criteria. That review criteria is literally what the reviewers of the grants, so you submit this grant, is going to be read by a bunch of people, and they're going to rank it. I think this one has this number of points, and it should, and then once all of the grants are ranked, the ones that reach the top are going to get funded. So these are the criteria that the reviewers are using to rate or rank your proposal. So use them. No, this is what the reviewer is looking for, and make sure you ring all those bells. If you're not ringing all those bells, you're leaving something on the table, and you don't want to leave anything on the table. So use the review criteria to your advantage. The most common reasons applications are just outright rejected or not funded. The application doesn't clearly explain the importance or potential of the project. The project's more about personal gain than the benefit of others. So this gets to that, if it's new to your farm, but it's been done a bajillion other times, it's not going to get funded. But if it's new to your farm and potentially could be used by other farmers in your region, now there you're starting to ring the bells. Application has poor budget details. You got to have really clear budgets. Doesn't have to be super detailed, but they have to be clear and intelligible. And the project is trying to do too much. Everybody who has ever written a grant tries to do too much. And we'll hammer this home as we get further. There's going to be several points along the development of the grant proposal where you have to have those moments of truth and decide, okay, what's the one thing we really need and want to do? If you can have auxiliary objectives, that's great. But if you try to throw together a project that has too many objectives, the reviewers are going to say, there's no way they're going to be able to do all this, and you're not going to get funded. So focus on a very, very clearly articulated objective, one or two, maybe three, and do them really well. And you're going to have a much better place to start. And this is the most important part about farmers trying to write a grant. Be kind to yourself and ask for help. It's not, well, I've probably been quoted a million times saying, oh, these grants are really easy to get. And that's true if you've written 150-page federal grants. These are easy relative to that. But if you've never written a grant, or you've maybe only done one or two small ones in their past, you're going to need help, and you're going to need clarification. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Everybody needs it all the time. And start right now. So as soon as this Zoominar is done, you're going to start working on your grant proposal, so you have time to get it all tweaked before it's time to submit. Okay, some really big do's and don'ts when you're putting a grant narrative together. It's really tempting to insert lots of web links because you're going to be limited by the number of characters and pages and words you can use. Don't do it. You're just trying to cheat the page and word limits, and the reviewers don't have the time or frankly the interest to follow those. So you do literally have to be able to explain your project in an intelligible and concise way within the word count limits, and use measurable outcomes. We're going to hit that again. If it doesn't have a unit attached to it, like feet, number, pounds, percent, then it's not measurable. It has to be something that is measurable. All right, so this is just a little nut and bolt for people who perhaps have never used Microsoft Word or aren't that really savvy in it. How to get your character and word counts. So when you go to you got your document here open in Word, and you're going to go to the review tab, and then you're going to highlight whatever it is you want to get counted. So here I've got my title, it's highlighted. Once it's highlighted, I go over to word count and I click it, and voila, it tells me, well, there's 10 words, there's 58 characters, not counting the spaces, and there's 67 characters, including the spaces. The character counts in these grants online always include the spaces. So, well, usually include the spaces. So assume they include the spaces. So for this particular title, I was allowed 150 characters. I did this one with 67. So there you go. Okay, this is just the warning for people who are going to feel at some point like I am just throwing way too much at you way too fast. This is how I think through the process of writing a grant proposal after years of experience. I'm hopeful that as a novice, that getting to kind of see inside the head of somebody who had done this for a living gives you some insight that you can find useful. That's my goal. You're very probably going to approach this very differently. Maybe your writing style is different. That's fine. It's the end result that matters. So what I'm really hoping is that you can get some insights into how my brain wraps around using the RFP to generate a really good grant proposal. That's my goal.
Hey, Cindy.
Yes.
Good question there. So if they feel like they do need help, do you have a suggestion about who, like, are there certain resources out there, or where would they turn for help?
Yeah, so the first place you look is, let's say it together, the RFP. The RFP always lists, has a very comprehensive list of sources you can go to get help. So it might be the program director. In the case of SARE, the project coordinator is 5-state, so they'll list each individual state who the contact people are for that particular grant program in that state. And there are also other programs. So in Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Michael Fields Institute, and these are in the RFPs, so you don't have to remember them. The Michael Fields Institute does free grant consultation. So they'll help you with developing and reviewing it and doing checklists. I'm also willing to do that in a limited basis. I mean, that's part of my job. So I'm happy to review a proposal. Say you've got it, you know, you think it's really good and you just want some fresh eyes on it. I'm happy to help with that. But the first place to look is the RFP, and it's going to give you a lot of resources in terms of how to find help when you need it. Okay. So, okay, I'm skipping. So here we go. We've got, so the second part, after the title, they want a 1-sentence description of the project that tells the reviewer what your project is about and how it may be used. So 1 sentence, that's not much, 160 characters. So you can see that I do what I call euphemistically the upchuck and edit version of grant writing. So I just kind of do free flow. I'm going to write, and I'm just going to write, and I'm not going to worry about the details, or I might use that as bullets, just kind of get my concepts down. And then I'm going to take that bulleted thing and I'm going to turn it into a paragraph that kind of makes sense to me. And that's you know, way too many characters, right? 307 compared to 160 I need. But then I can go back and revise it. And typically, so how did I get from that to this? Oh, this wild rice, creating intergenerational transfer of knowledge, skills, equipment, using education and apprentice, blah, blah. How did I get from that to that? Well, it's because I finished the rest of my proposal and then I came back and edited this. That's how that happened. So you're gonna start from the beginning, and you're gonna kind of put down your concepts and ideas. And it's once you've finished your objectives, your methods, outcomes, measurable outcomes, then you're gonna go back and start to revise all of these other pieces at the start. So don't agonize over these early, because they will change. This is still at 100, well, now I'm at 158 spaces, so I'm good. Okay, so just a tip in general paragraph construction for those who might feel like they need it. If you already know this, I apologize. I'm talking to a lot of people, so I'm just trying to kind of cover a lot of bases. So in general, a paragraph, the very first sentence of that paragraph needs to hook the reader. You have to be able to read that paragraph, that sentence in isolation, and the reader has to go, oh, I want more. Got to do that. And then the body of the paragraph leads the reader in a kind of very linear fashion through the steps of your proposal until it gets to the last sentence where it sums up your expected results. So this is an education. So the one I'm using, the wild rice one, is kind of an educational outreach. So that's kind of the end result. We're going to provide workshops and apprenticeships and blah, 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 blah. If you're doing something that's maybe, for example, measuring soil carbon, and you're using a technique that you think is going to increase soil carbon, but you don't know, because that's what research is, right? You don't know the end result ahead of time, because if you did, you wouldn't need to do the research, right? So these grant proposals, you don't have to know that what I do is going to increase soil carbon. You have to have a reasonable, plausible story to tell as to why you think it would. And so, for example, a last sentence in something like that might be, we will assess the percent carbon change as a result of our blah, 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 whatever it is you're doing, or increased growth or break-even point on livestock production. So you're going to assess it. So you basically say, I'm going to measure this, and we're going to determine if this pilot program or technique that we're proposing works or not. If you know ahead of time it's going to work, then you're not really doing original research. Okay. One of the and this is so I did my upchuck, and now I'm starting to do my edit. So editing, a really important piece of editing, because now, let's see here. Okay, so look here, we're in the project abstract. We went from character limits to word limits. Very important distinction, because the word to is the same as the word generational. So when you start to edit your text, you're going to look for those words or phraseologies that kind of waste words. To, the, then, things like that. So for example, right here, harvest rice to prevent contamination, I could just replace that with harvested rice preventing contamination. So I eliminated one word. Now I have that to use somewhere else. Same thing. Yeah, same thing down here. To facilitate well, I can just use the word facilitating or facilitated. So now I've saved two more words that I get to use somewhere else. Yee-hee. And then there's this hideous sentence here that is completely unintelligible. And that's fine because that's from the upchuck part. Now I'm trying to edit this, trying to make it tighten up so I can say the same thing with fewer words, which more often than not makes it more clear. That's a really important piece. Is that as you tighten up the words, you're going to be honing in on what's the important piece of that sentence. What do I really want to say? So clearly there's two thes, which is not good. So I went from, you can read it at your leisure, but I went from needs to be understood, so that, to blah, and then depending on, and then. So phraseologies like that are just, and then and, ands and thens and thes. So we're going to take that all out. We're going to wordsmith it, and it becomes, finally, understanding how dehulling and threshing can be done to minimize broken grains, to remove or leave various amounts of bran. See, I could take out the, because when I read it, I didn't need the. Various amounts of bran, winnowing the chaff, and sorting for quality. So I took that hideous, unintelligible sentence, and I think I made it more intelligible. All right. So this is kind of a nod to people who've already written a grant or maybe have read the RFP. So this is my abstract. Remember, this is kind of one of the things that's at the beginning of the proposal, but you're really not going to write it or tweak it till the very end. And there's a few things missing in this. So traditional rice, yada, 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 and then we're going to do classes and transfer knowledge, yada, yada. There's some really important things missing from this abstract. The methods, the measurable outcomes, and your collaborators. And do you remember how many words there were allowed in this? Let's see. 200 words. 200 words. Ha, ha, ha. So there's 200 words allowed here. I'm at 254 words, and I still have to add the methods, measurable outcomes, and collaborators. Do not panic. You are fine. You are completely normal. This is how it works. So you did the upchuck, you did the edit, you've tightened it up. You realize you're going to need to add those things later. You're going to go on and finish writing those sections, the methods, the measurable outcomes, and your collaborators. Once those sections are written and really pretty much nailed down, it's going to be much easier to go back and edit your abstract. So again, don't agonize over those early parts of the proposal because they're actually the ones that are going to get written last. Collaborators are super important. As I said, the MDA grant requires that. Timeout. Stefan, I realize I forgot to start my clock watch. So give me a time check every once in a while. Okay?
We are at 4:35 right now.
Okay.
25 more minutes.
All right, I'm going to start my timer now. I got a lot to go. So collaborators, super important. They are in MDA, they're required. SARE, they're not required, but highly. And collaborators are the best way to get skills that aren't already on your team. And with farmers, that's often the scientific study design. So what's a control? What's a treatment? That kind of stuff. Data analysis. What's significant? That has a specific meaning in science. How do you run statistics? Blah, blah, blah. You don't have to know how to do all that. That's what a collaborator is for. And then outreach. Most professionals in the field have really well-established outreach and communication infrastructures, so why not use them? And then the fourth thing, which isn't specifically in any of the RFPs, but I like to really make a call out to, because it's kind of in there, but it's kind of said, is to create inclusivity for diverse stakeholders and voices in your proposal. So as you're writing it, think about, well, who are the normal people that you would know and who would be interested in this, and then take a step back and think of other stakeholders or voices or people who might think this is relative or might find it interesting, but typically aren't at the table. So that might be native tribes. It might be people of low income, beginning farmers and ranchers. Sometimes established farmers and ranchers, the best thing you can do is teach beginners. So think about that as you're developing your proposal. And communicate early with your potential collaborators. They're super busy people. They want to help. It's often their job to help, but you can't just throw something at them at the last minute. Okay, project objectives. Notice 100 words. That's not very many. So you have to make them reasonable, related, achievable, and measurable. So 100 words. So for example, I like to start this by just doing a bullet outline. My objectives are to blah, 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 blah. So right now I'm at 66 words, which is a good place to start because I'm going to have to change it and edit it as we go. So this is part of the SARE grant, but I think most grants have something like this. When you get to the measurable benefits, sometimes they're called outcomes, impacts, there's going to be some kind of categorization. And this does more than just satisfy the bean counters. It tips their hat as to what kind of projects they're really interested in funding right now. What they funded 10 years ago is not what they're funding today. What they're funding today is not what they're going to fund 5 years from now. So these categories are important because they tell you what things this grant proposal finds important right now. And you're going to link that to your objectives. The temptation in the grant proposal is to click all the boxes. Yay, we're going to do it all. But obviously, that's not really how it happens in the real world. So you really want to pick specifically which impacts you're really targeting. And you'll see here, I kind of moved my little star, improve market opportunities. I think that's something that we're going to do with this Wild Rice project, but I'm really not 100% sure yet. So I'm kind of putting that on the back burner until we get further along in the development process. So part B, so this was part A, measuring benefits and impacts, part A, that's the categories. And now they want you to give a narrative. It can be in a paragraph or it can be in a table. And my suggestion to you, again, this is how my brain makes sense of this. Your brain might do it differently, but this is how my brain does it. Oh, a little aside. So you're going to get your grant, right? You got your grant. Woohoo, yay. Make sure that one of your participants is a really anal bookkeeper and record keeper so that they record everything. Because when it's time to write your reports, you're going to need that. And take lots of photos because you're going to need those too. Okay. So when I'm putting together my measurable benefits, I'm going to take my objectives. Remember that 100 word objectives. And I'm going to start to correlate them or match them up with the benefits categories, the benefits impacts categories. Remember that? So I do this by actually literally putting them side by side in a table. So my first objective was to increase the number of new wild rice harvesters in northeastern Minnesota. Well, which benefit category does that fit? Well, I think it fits pretty well with increased business enterprise opportunities. Maybe. Increase the amount of wild rice harvested and processed for personal use, wholesale and retail sales in the region. Well, that actually dings 3 of the bells. Improved income or profitability, market opportunities, still question mark on that one. And if I'm overreaching to call that one, we'll see. And then improve food accessibility, because we're interested in not just sales, but we're also interested in homesteader and personal use increasing. So start to correlate your objectives with those benefit categories. And once you start to do that, you're going to be able, as you move forward with your measurable outcomes, it's going to become much clearer what you're going to measure, because that's super important. So I'm going to increase the number of new wild rice harvesters in northeastern Minnesota. What will I measure? I'm going to measure the number of new wild rice harvesters that are directly or indirectly related to our project efforts. Now, directly might be fairly easy to, sometimes indirectly is hard to measure. So this is what I'm going to measure. But then the other question is, well, how are you going to measure that? So in education and outreach, oftentimes surveys, pre and post surveys or interviews of participants are a really good way to get a metric on that. Most farmers do not have experience with pre and post surveys, right? That's where your collaborator comes in. This is the kind of stuff that your collaborators got experience with generally, and that they'll be able to help you with. And then voluntary self-reporting, new customers with established wild rice processors. So again, I'm just going through and I'm kind of throwing this all out on the table. It's kind of like cooking spaghetti. You throw it on the wall. Some of it sticks, some of it doesn't. This is the first real moment of truth. So you've put together your objectives and you've matched it with the categories and you've decided how you're going to measure it, what you're going to measure and how you're going to measure it. And now you have this ginormous list of stuff that you say you're going to do. You have to assess, do I have the people, the skills, the budget, and the time allotted in the grant to actually do all of this? 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. So you're going to start paring back. And this is where you really have the opportunity between you and your collaborators and other people who are on your team to really focus in on, if we could only do one thing, what would it be? And why is it the one thing? And that's going to help you kind of tighten up this measurable benefits, objectives kind of stuff. I'm hoping this is making sense as we're going. Stefan's not interrupting me, so I assume so. All right. Emphasize outreach.
Everyone's just absorbing your wisdom.
Or maybe I'm going too fast. Anyway, so emphasize outreach. Outreach, while if you looked at the review criteria, I think it was, between 10 and 15%. It's critical. So you see the yellow, all projects must include outreach. And it can't just be cheesy, I'm gonna put some stuff on my website. That's just not gonna fly. So, but on the other end of the spectrum, you don't have to do everything everywhere all the time. And you'll also see, in this example, there are different people doing different things. And that's again where you have multiple participants, both farmers and your collaborators, who can help you with this outreach. And you produce a timeline. So, and it's in red, just in case you didn't notice it, plan for COVID appropriate outreach, because these are projects that are going to start in 2021. And we don't know where we're going to be in 2021. We just don't. And so make sure that your outreach, if it isn't specifically virtual, that it has an alternative so that you can still do your outreach even if COVID's still a nightmare.
Hey, Cindy, someone was wondering what collaborators did you identify in this project as an example of collaborators you reached out to?
There are a couple of people in funding organizations that I've reached out to, and then we're starting to, so we have a fair number of collaborators. Can I tip my hat about the wild rice thing?
I'd say so.
Oh, yay! We managed to reach out to several wild rice processors this year. We're already in the process of doing some pilot apprenticeship with some people in the Finland area. And to our great joy, we were able to purchase a full, lovely set of equipment, parchers, dehullers, winnowers, gravity table. And so that transaction is in process. So we're going to have the equipment. So we already have collaborations with several processors, quite a few harvesters and growers, and we have some initial interest amongst the tribes. If you're going to do a wild rice project, you got to have the tribes involved. That's just, it'd be stupid not to, my not so humble opinion. So yeah, in the development of the idea, you're going to be talking to people, meeting with people, and trying to figure out, how to put a team together that, did I answer the question? I think I kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when it comes to collaborators, it's what I'm hearing is, first look to see if you've already got collaborations that are pre-existing that you've already started working with.
Right.
But for instance, like, if it requires you working with a nonprofit, maybe trying to find a way to identify and work with a nonprofit early on.
Right. And if you just feel totally lost about finding a collaborator, like what does that mean? How do I approach them? That's a good thing to pitch to your program manager, whichever grant you're submitting, because they know how to help you, at least give you hints on how to find collaborators. And then again, the Finland Food Chain, other food agriculture related organizations, SFA, land stewardship, think of all those organizations that do stuff related to sustainable agriculture. There's probably a collaborator somewhere in one of those organizations who would be thrilled to help you. So don't be afraid to ask. Some are going to say no, they don't have time or they don't have the right expertise. Don't let that daunt you. Just, keep looking. Did that help?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So the budget. So I've reviewed many grants. I've written a lot of grants and I've reviewed a lot of grants, and the budget is always a bugaboo, and I don't totally understand why, but don't ask for funding for things that aren't allowed. It seems like a duh, but people do it all the time. And so that's like, try not to like game RFP. Like if it says no equipment, it means no equipment, right? If it says no overhead for general operating expenses that would happen whether the grant happened or not, don't try to game the system. I mean, the reviewers aren't stupid, right? Use real numbers, don't guess. So if you're going to say, you're going to lease some land for this, what's the average lease rate? In fact, the Minnesota Department of Ag website has an online county by county table of the average land lease rates in each county. So you can go there. Oftentimes the RFP itself provides specific, like the mileage, this 0.575, that's just not a number I pulled out of my hat. That's the number, that's the federal reimbursement rate for travel right now. So that's what you can ask for mileage. Typically farmer labor, you're not expected to be free. Everybody knows you got to eat too. $20 an hour is on average the average that's used in a lot of these grants. If you're asking for $50 an hour for a farmer, you're going to have to be able to justify that. Okay, doesn't mean you can't ask for more, you just have to be able to justify it. And then matching funds, again, the RFP. Matching funds are almost always some kind of real money. They very rarely allow in-kind contributions anymore. It used to be that you could, like, I'm the farmer and I'm not going to get paid, but I'm going to get to count my time as in kind. They don't allow that a lot anymore, I think because it got gamed so much. So matching funds tend to be cash, like in the bank, that you can document that you actually have in the bank. You can't just say it's in the bank. You got to be able to show them it's in the bank. A loan, a non-state grant. So if you can get some federal money or some private money or some other kind of money to do those matches, you can do that. Or it might be some kind of liquid asset. I don't know what that is, but yeah. And so know what your matching funds, what are required and what are allowed and what are not allowed. Okay, so in the budget, just because sometimes there's confusion over this. So when we say personnel, and this is the text right out of the RFP. So you can go to the RFP and read this. I'm not making this up. I did not bother to type all this up. This is straight out of the RFP. Personnel, it's paid and unpaid. So for example, you have a collaborator who already is salaried and they don't need to get paid by this grant to do what they've committed to do. You still list them in the budget at $0 because, and you're going to mention it in the methods and the outreach and, you know, all that kind of stuff you're going to mention here. But here you get to ring that bell one more time that you've got a fabulous collaborator who, by the way, is donating their time. So don't forget to include those unpaid personnel contributions to your project. Is it realistic? Look at the examples and be able to justify your rates if they're different than kind of what the standard is. Materials and supplies are by definition non-durable things that are going to get used up by the project. So if you're doing a cover crop using annuals, that's a material and supply. But if you're going to be using perennial seeds to create a perennial stock like a pollinator garden, that's down below in the equipment, permanent fencing, perennial seeds. So material supplies is something that's going to get 100% completely used up and gone during the extent of your project. Travel and other direct costs. So direct costs is, so if you're going to hire a consultant, or say one of your collaborator needs some money, maybe to travel, or a small, you know, maybe they get paid, they need $5 an hour to provide that service to you. So it's some kind of offset. So that's where that would go, other direct costs. So direct costs basically again means it's going to be used and is needed only because you're doing this project. If you're going to till your field anyway, that's not a direct cost. If you're going to till your field and then plant it with something different, the something different you plant is an eligible cost. If it takes you longer, or you have to do 2 passes, or you have to do an extra cultivation that you wouldn't normally do because of this particular so then you can, that's another direct cost. But you can't ask for indirect costs, things that would happen anyway and expenses that you would have anyway whether you're doing the grant or not. And there's some slicing and dicing that can happen there, but I hope that helps clarify some of that. Equipment, again, equipment, each grant allows different amounts or for equipment. So this again is the SARE grant, and equipment is something that costs less than $5,000 or less and has more than 1 year of a useful life. So it's going to, even if it's a 3-year project, if that piece of equipment has a longer life than 1 year, it requires a match. MDA's equipment cap was, I think, $1,500. So each grant has a different definition and cap and what match is required or not required. Again, it's usually very well spelled out in the RFP. All right, so this is the most important part of your grant proposal. So you've spent weeks, months writing this thing and editing it, and it's beautiful. It's a piece of art. It's gorgeous. It's perfect. You're going to have at least 1 or 2 other people who have no prior knowledge of what the heck you're doing, have no experience in it even. You want them to read it and give you ruthless feedback. If they don't understand it, then you need to edit it and revise it. You need whoever's reading, because the reviewer, they typically are, you know, people with expertise in farming, but, you know, I might be writing a grant on apple production and it's going to be reviewed by a livestock producer. He doesn't know anything about what I do. And so we need to lead those people who are experts in some field and have, you know, expert thinking minds, at least we'd like to think so. We need to be able to ensure that our grant proposal is intelligible and readable by them. And this is the way you do that. So you had somebody read it and they gave you lots of great stuff and you revised it. Now do you submit it? Oh, no, no, no. You have somebody read it again. And you do that as many times as you can until you have to submit the dang thing. Because the more reviews by fresh eyes and fresh minds you have, the better the proposal will be, almost inevitably. All right, so you had it reviewed. It's perfect in every way, shape, or form. Before you go to the computer to submit it, you're going to use the checklist, which is in the RFP. Everybody say it together, in the RFP. Make sure you have everything in your checklist with you on your computer, ready to go before you go log in to submit it.
Hey, Cindy.
Yeah.
Just check in. So we're about 2 minutes to 5.
Oh my, I'm really sorry. Okay, questions?
So why don't we do this? Why don't I just kind of do a quick closeout? Well, goodbye to everybody, but whoever wants to ask questions, we'll stay on. And
I'll stay on as long as people want. I'm more than happy. This was a lot to cover in a short amount of time.
Yeah, so if you, again, you can find in the chat there in the not Friends of Finland, sorry. That's our parent organization. The finlandfoodchain.org is where you will be able to find this presentation and the PDF slide. And again, you can contact any of us through that, or you can get on our newsletter as well and just stay abreast of what we're doing, especially with this wild rice project.
Yeah, we're super excited.
Yeah, which is great. And so thank you all for coming. If you have questions, I will keep tracking, and let's do it. So you use the Q&A or the chat feature, or you can just sign out and we'll see you another time.
Yeah, if anybody has, I'm happy to stay on for a little while. If anybody has some really specific question or something that's still lurking in their mind, I'm happy to do it.
I am not seeing anything popping up. Maybe everyone's just hanging out and hoping someone's got a great question.
Well, I'm hoping that this was helpful. That was my goal. I'm really hoping that people found this helpful and in some way, shape, or form. And reach out if you need more help. Stefan, do you have the link for the PowerPoint, the Finland food chain? Can you put that in the chat? Somebody just asked for it again. If you Google Finland food chain.
Yeah, I'd have to go. I might still have it copied. Let me see here.
Yeah.
Yep, so, there it is. So
there we go. Yeah. So yeah, Finland food chain, and then all of our webinars, in fact, not just this one, all of our Zoominars, of which there's actually getting to be quite a list, are under the resources panel. There's some really awesome stuff. Yeah. So look at all the other stuff that's there too. Yeah, thank you for putting up with my yada, yada, yada. Like I say, I really hope it's helpful.
Okay, well, hopefully the weather is equally beautiful wherever you are all at, and we up here are certainly praying for rain.
Yeah.
But we've been praying all summer with very few responses, so I'm not too hopeful.
I've actually stopped looking at the forecast because it's just debilitating. But we water. Oh, Moses, I'm really glad to hear that this was helpful, that you haven't written a grant before. I hope that this inspires you, that you can, and that there is help out there. If you get stuck at any point, reach out to somebody in the RFP, reach out to me. There's people out there to help you. We're all in this together.
Okay.
Oh, Sarah, thank you so much. I'm glad you liked it. Wonderful. Wonderful. See, I didn't waste 20 years. Dang it. I have valuable skills that I can share with other people.
I don't think that was ever in question.
Well, maybe to you, but sometimes I doubt it. It's like, what did I do for 20 years? Why did I do that? But it's nice to be in a position now that I can and share and support other people. So, because I didn't get where I am alone. People taught me too. None of us are born doing this. So. Patty, yes, pray for rain. Keep praying for rain. Okay, there's only a few of you attendees left. Come on, you got me. You got me right now.
I think you just overwhelmed their brain synapses.
Well, I do know that I covered a ton of material really fast. Yeah. And so, yeah, if you don't feel overwhelmed, you weren't paying attention. So, yeah, well, but again, there's help out there.
Okay. Well, I think we can go ahead and we'll end the session. And we will talk to everyone later. Thank you for attending.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, and good luck.
Yes.
And we'd love to hear if you actually used what we said, what we talked about here, and were able to successfully get a grant. That would make us super happy. So let us know.